you could try.
Yeah, that sounds good. That's what I was thinking too. I'll do that.
And Kavi, did you see my email from this morning?
I did. I just
Okay.
responded to you and Mary.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, we are unmuted. We are streaming on YouTube and I'm going to start recording.
Okay, that sounds good. And I think we are going to wait a couple of minutes until Kelly joins because with such a small group, we do need all participants. So hopefully she jumps on here soon.
Yeah.
So we are live now. So.
And I can mute us for longer if you'd like.
Yeah, maybe just mute us in the room. Okay, so we're going to go on mute for just a minute until Kelly comes on, and you can turn your camera off, Serena, until we see Kelly. Okay, it looks like we have Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Hey.
And so we have everybody here. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm just going to kind of lead and facilitate this meeting. So this is a working group meeting of the waste and materials subgroup. And should we do a roll call for something like this?
Let's go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to do a quick roll call, even though it's not written on the agenda. We have Kelly.
Here.
Serena.
Here.
And Covey.
Here.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first agenda item today is that just to kind of recap where we're at. This working group has been just doing some fact finding on looking at different options for achieving two of the CCAP strategies that were prioritized for this biennium related to waste and materials. The first strategy, I can pull these up later if we need to look at them, but one strategy is about improving recycling at multifamily residents, which includes both creating codes, standards, and specifications to ensure that multifamily developments are kind of optimized and set up for recycling infrastructure. And then also conducting outreach and education to improve recycling in multifamily housing. And then the other strategy that we've kind of grouped in with this for now is developing and delivering educational programs that teach residents about food waste prevention and improved food waste diversion. So kind of multifamily and food waste are the two. So in some of the recent meetings, you all have been talking with the county and the environmental center to kind of understand like the lay of the land, what's already happening out there now. And one of the big programs that we've learned about is the environmental center does a lot of waste related education, and they have one particular program called the Community Innovation Fund that a couple of other nonprofits and government agencies are actually funding this program, and they get to kind of work within a model that the environmental center has set up for this program, but you can also customize it a little bit to meet the needs of your organization. So we have, a month ago, we met with the environmental center to just kind of hear information about how this program works. So the first agenda item is just to kind of close the loop on, or just debrief since that presentation. So specifically on the Community Innovation Fund, the discussion that I was hoping to hear from you three today is just any initial thoughts you have on that program or just kind of immediate reactions, and then kind of where you want to go from here, particularly if you think that this group wants to go, feels like this is a program that you want to support and that that's a good way to meet our CCAP goals. If you think that you want to do additional research and continue to look at kind of other potential ways to do that. So the first discussion will be about the Community Innovation Fund in general. And then second, we'll talk about kind of bigger picture if there are things outside of this Community Innovation Fund. So with that, I will just open the floor to the committee members.
And Cassie, is this a good time for me to?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I've shared this and been in touch with all of y'all and the Cassie and Mary as well. But I did start as the Rethink Waste Program Coordinator last week, which is a part-time position at the Environmental Center. And so even though I think Cassie consulted with Mary, I'm not technically required to, out of an abundance of caution, and to ensure there's not even an appearance of a potential conflict of interest, I will recuse myself from this deliberation and decision. So I'll turn off my screen for this part of the meeting, and then I'll rejoin once this discussion is over. So I won't participate. Any questions before I do that? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Covey.
Kelly, do you want to start? It seems to me from the conversations and the discussions that we've had together as a group and with the ECC that it is, or with the environmental committee or the environmental center, that there's a well-established program that we would benefit from building upon, as opposed to initiating an entirely separate process or project, but rather to build upon what is existing and to support their efforts.
I would agree with that. Part of our initial plan from the onset, CCAP going forward, is to utilize community partners where current and opportune programs exist. And I think, we've done enough due diligence here to know that they do have the most established program with, I think, the most voice in the community that is gonna, being able to just help support them with some of the goals that our plans are established, and just maybe align there and give them the support that they need. I do agree that I think we should utilize and not reinvent the wheel.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like to me then, is this working group interested in recommending in some form like that the city then do like a large sponsorship with the environmental center? And the dollar amounts I kind of put out there just to give us a scale. We could, the dollar amount can be whatever you guys think is appropriate. The two levels that they had kind of proposed is a $20,000 and a $40,000. Do you have any initial? Well, so one is that does this group want, is that the intention is to recommend making that sponsorship to the environmental center?
I think so. I see Kelly nodding her head as well.
Yeah, agreed.
I think obviously utilizing their programming, supporting it with some monetary and advisory support within that is appropriate. Whatever that dollar amount is, maybe it's a phased approach. I'm not saying I know the dollar amount off the top of my head, but maybe we do it incrementally and create kind of a plan. So we have checkpoints where we're able to evaluate success or risk factors within the program as time moves on. So we're not committing too much too early. That's just a thought I had. I just want to make sure that we're being aware of the money that's being funneled and how it's being tracked and managed.
Yeah, and is it possible to ask them to provide a proposal for sort of multiple tiers of funding? Like, here's where they're at today. If we gave them 10, 20, or 40,000, here is like what additionally they could achieve, along with project milestones where we could confirm, budget as well as program achievements.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we kind of saw those numbers. She had them on a slide, but I think it'd be a great idea to ask them to put that in like a document that we can review, and then we can ask them to elaborate a little bit on that. So I'm just taking notes so I get this right.
It would be helpful for us to make sure that we're aligned with how they're thinking about next steps and how they may expand. I know she presented some of that. And then the second piece is, as we continue to support this program from an accountability perspective, making sure that we're staying on budget, on track, and meeting the deliverables.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful then to have them including kind of the, like, there can be a dollar amount, a scope, that we can consider? And then would it, should I ask them to include kind of like a timeline of like the rollout, you know, kind of like what exactly the program would look like and all that?
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, I think so. The timeline, being kind of what those deliverables look like and when to expect feedback. I know some, data can take a while, but whether it's just executing on some educational tools and print and, starting whatever that scale looks like, being able to at least know on our end how they're achieving those, that scope of work is important.
Okay, that sounds good. So I have kind of asking for there's the scope, obviously, a few different dollar amounts, the timeline, deliverable, the actual like action steps, which would be part of the timeline. And then also like what kind of data could be reported back in.
Yeah, that would be great. Any data collection they have. And then is the expectation that we would then just meet with them, at each identified milestone. And so as a part of their proposal, we should set the expectation that like, as they achieve a milestone, there will be a meeting where they're, presenting these updates.
Either a meeting or at least at the very minimum, a report showcasing it with some dialogue. But depending on the length of the milestones, right? If it's months and months, obviously a meeting would probably be more appropriate. But if they're hitting certain milestones on a weekly, just as an example, on a weekly basis, obviously, then I agree with you, Kelly. I think that's important. I just want to make sure we don't,
overload ourselves.
Yeah. But having some kind of report out at each milestone expectation is important.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. And we can ask them in their proposal to kind of suggest like when those touch points should be kind of based on how they see the program rolling out. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then the other thing we had kind of talked about is like, are there a specific like objectives that we want to call out for them to make sure they meet? So what I'll do is I'll make sure to include the two strategies, the outreach and education language and the strategies for the CCAP. Here, let me pull it up on a slide for you so you guys can just remember what that, just kind of see like what that looks like exactly.
Thank you. You're reading my mind because I was exactly going to say that language in itself, obviously it's not so detailed, but it does have kind of that higher level expectation.
Yeah, it would be these two. This code one is separate. We can talk about that later in this meeting, but it would be these two outreach and education ones. So these are, they're very high level. So we'll include that, but are there other like specific, I don't know, objectives that you guys want to kind of further define these as?
I think, sorry, I don't want to, you can jump in a second, Kelly. I think, they've done a lot of that detail and that's kind of part of that scope. I think, and I don't have the specifics in front of me, but when they were presenting to us, they have kind of some of those milestones, education and outreach kind of divvied out. So I think these play really well into that. I don't want to necessarily tell them how to do it because they're the experts here. I don't have any top of mind additional things that I feel we should divvy out specifically. I think part of that scope of work would be them kind of telling us how they think it might work best. But okay. I don't know. Kelly, what are your thoughts?
The only addition I had, and I recognize that this may be slightly out of scope, but it's so closely related that I'm wondering if we can build off of it. There are a number of small business restaurants that maybe it's just a matter of tweaking the language a little bit, where we're providing similar education. Most of the information is so similar, but if we're able to, add a couple bullet points and reach an even wider audience, the business owners like food trucks, for example, they may not live within the city of Bend, so they're not aware of how recycling food waste is structured. So that's the only other piece that I've been thinking about.
I like that train of thought. I want to make sure we're not, my only thought on top of that is there's two streams, there's residential and commercial. And while they all funnel to potentially the same place, their programs are they are a little different in the way that the haulers, and maybe I'm wrong, Cassie, let me know if that's, but I feel like at least from my remembrance, the structure and the rules are a little different. So I just don't want to add too much. But I also agree that we shouldn't overlook that.
Okay.
Well, Kelly, are you proposing that like potentially adding like to the food waste part, like adding in some language around engaging with food waste businesses, or can you maybe articulate your recommendation again?
Yeah. So, well, I'll give you an example for a bit of context. I recognize that a number of food trucks they're increasingly providing their food in compostable containers, and compostable containers aren't typically processed within our county, and they're more expensive. And so as a resident, I'm bringing that compostable container home. And so there may be some confusion around that. I think the environmental center has already addressed that in their existing education. But for business owners, is there potential to provide that context, that detail to them, so they're making smarter environmental foodware choices to help simplify what their customers do? They're contributing positively to our structure, our infrastructure, and frankly, they're probably going to be saving themselves a bit of money as well.
I see what you're saying. Sorry, I misunderstood it the way you said it.
Yeah, but your point is well taken, that a lot of people are eating at food truck lots, and that is likely managed by a separate commercial, so that they may be two very different structures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think if you recall, the way that the Community Innovation Fund works is that it's actually organizations. Maybe it's open to individual residents too, but they actually propose like their own programs. So it'll be someone like a food truck owner may say, I want a bunch of signs at my food truck. Like, so say there's a food truck owner that's kind of on top of this and is like, I'm not offering compostables because I know it's actually maybe not the best here, but they're frustrated because people don't understand that. And then people are like, why don't you have compostables? So that food truck owner might say, I want a bunch of signs, or I want some interactive display that explains why I'm not using compostables, but I'm a small business. I don't have enough money to pay for that type of thing. So then they can go receive money from the Community Innovation Fund to run that project themselves. So I think the idea about like, okay, there needs to be kind of a campaign or an educational campaign around the composting thing is something that may not fall within the Community Innovation Fund unless there was a partner within the community. There could be a partner within the community that said there could be like a different nonprofit or maybe like a green team or something from a school that's like, we really want to do this campaign. And so we're going to develop these materials, but we need money to do it. And then they go to the Community Innovation Fund. So I think it's a really good, I like thinking of these specific things, but the Community Innovation Fund, sponsoring the Community Innovation Fund in and of itself doesn't give us the ability to say, hey, environmental center, go do this educational campaign with these specific messages, just because of the way that this program works. It's actually like, it's like a mini granting program for people to do all these community-based projects. And I think the idea of it is that it kind of encourages and fosters people within the community to be self-empowered, to identify their own solutions and work towards those. They have said that by growing the program, which they would, part of the city funding them and finding other funding partners will allow them to continue to grow this even more. They're hoping to be able to have their staff more proactively co-identify projects with community members. So I think that something like that could be built in if they're at the staffing capacity where like they might find a partner that they know could do a good job at this. And then they're thinking about kind of more proactively proposing these ideas too. But I don't think they're quite there yet to say for sure they can do that. That's kind of like part of the future vision. So did that all make sense?
Yes. And I think that's great. This is part of that culture building too, that I know Covey and many of us have said from the beginning. It's like that lifestyle shift, being able, like you said, Cassie, to empower others to identify and innovate and create solutions to their day-to-day that they're seeing. I don't want to discount what you're saying, Kelly, because I think it's super important, and not to get in the weeds there, but there's that visibility factor. Oh, you're not using compostable, so you don't care. While whether they know that it's an impact or not, they, whether it's more of a pricing or they know that it's an issue in our county to actually get rid of it. There's also businesses that own those food lots that I think are forcing them to utilize, or it's kind of one of the rules as part of the lot, to utilize, compostable foodware as part of their agreement. I know I've heard that too. So just as we know, there's a lot of mismanaged understanding of the constraints and areas that we can improve. So it is a super important issue, and definitely something that I hope to see we can address. It showcases a lot of different areas that we talk about: the tourism, the residential, all of the things.
And the second part of this meeting, Kelly, I know you still have to leave at 1:30, right?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, I saw your email, which was super helpful in preparing.
Yeah, so I think it's good to be thinking about these things. Like the Community Innovation Fund is one program. It doesn't necessarily mean that the city has fully met, their obligations for the CCAP. So so I think it's good to be thinking about those things. And we're going to start the conversation today, but we'll continue it, is to be thinking like, okay, so the Community Innovation Fund, if that moves forward, that's one piece of the solution, but there may and likely will be multiple other facets. So the next part of the meeting is going to be talking about like, okay, what are the other things that we still want to achieve that this Community Innovation Fund project is not meeting, and we still need to find solutions for. So I think the idea that you brought up about that is one that we can continue to look at and figure out like, okay, what are our other options for doing some more of these educational campaigns? What should that look like? And that could be a whole different recommendation altogether. So that kind of speaks to just the continued work.
Yeah, for sure. And based on the information that we got from Not Landfill, we know that there are limitations from an infrastructure perspective. So we'll have to get a bit creative in what will be practical and realistic.
Definitely. My Zoom kicked me off again, but you guys can still see me, so that's good. Okay, so as far as the Community Innovation Fund, what we have is that the working group intends to recommend to the full committee that we sponsor the Community Innovation Fund. But what we'd like to see as a next step is more of a written proposal from them that we can come back and kind of just so that we're all on the same page with like the whole package and what's being proposed. And in that decision, we can, when we look at that, we can like decide what the dollar amount is and that sort of thing. So what I would propose as next steps is that I'll ask for that information from the Environmental Center. And then we can hold another meeting. It'll be another public meeting. So it'll be like over, it can be over Zoom like this, but similar format to today, where we can actually review the proposal together. And then you guys can decide, if you want to make edits to that and send it back, or if you want to approve that. And then whenever that's finalized, if you guys are at a point where you feel comfortable with it, then the next step would be to take that proposal to the full committee. So we had that as tentatively having that discussion in March. But if it needs to bump until April because we're still working on it, that would be fine. But I think what I'm hoping is that we can get that turned around from the Environmental Center in the next 2 weeks or so. And then I'll send a doodle out to schedule our next meeting with this group, hopefully in the next like 3 to 4 weeks, which would be, and we can just see where we're at then.
Yeah.
Does that sound like an appropriate set of next steps, or anything else you guys would like to talk about on this one?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, cool. Well, perfect. Well, I think with that, then we can move on to the next topic. Covey, you're welcome to come back. Are you there? I know your video is not working. But your video is working. There he is. Oh, you're on mute.
I was able to restart my computer and hopefully it's working now.
Yeah, we can see you. Perfect.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay, great. Okay, well then we have the remainder of the meeting. And Kelly, I'd love to hear your initial thoughts before you go that we can kind of noodle on. It's kind of like I said, I wanted to just have an open discussion about what's next for this group. So we have these two strategies. We have the Community Innovation Fund that we're pursuing, but what are the other things that you guys think we want to be, are there other things we want to still be doing? And what do you guys see as kind of the next steps for getting those done? And I have an update related to the multifamily codes, but Kelly, I just want to check in with you to see if you don't have to, but if you had anything that you wanted to share before you have to sign off.
I guess I'm constantly thinking about how we simplify it for the residents so that, because ultimately people's lives are busy. It's based and not everyone has the same infrastructure or access to it. And so how do we continue exploring opportunities with businesses to simplify what they're using, what they're providing, kind of education they have available?
Well, and so you don't have any specific ideas right now, but just kind of wanting to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of this work before, and I think, like going to the food lot owners, having conversations with them about what requirements they have in place, what kind of marketing they may put out for their own, for customers who are coming on site, making sure they've got clearly labeled bins. Like there's a series of pretty simple but impactful actions that they could take, and we could help provide that guidance. And I don't know if that's us meeting with like individual food lot owners and having those discussions, or providing them with documentation suggestions. Much like we were talking about with HOAs, like changing the regulations, allowing for more environmentally responsible actions.
I see it as almost like a collaborative where, and I'm making it super simple and pretending there's no hurdles in place, right? Kind of like a supply chain thing where everyone's sourcing from the same place. So one, you're getting better rates for your product because you're also, it's like you're shared sourcing, and the sources are approved by our landfill, our haulers, and the people that should be stating that it's a decent product to be utilizing, earth friendly, or whatever it can be, whatever all the components are. Like, we know what's good and we know what's bad in general, but even I, being as in depth as I am, sometimes question like what's what, knowing the limitations of our landfill and other things. Sometimes it can get really hard. So I feel like it's almost like, hey, can we get everyone together, use the shared supply chain resources, save money. Everyone has a sign that says they're part of this program. Maybe it's part reusable, part, throwaway containers, but, something that's like a shared, so everyone feels comfortable with what product they're using for their food, whether it's, I just super high level thoughts thrown out there.
No, that's 100% the easiest. It's mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Because that's one of the biggest issues is the perception, right? That we talked about, like going to one food truck and they're using just the basic paper, red and white, hot dog container, or the other one that's using the compostable egg crate type look. And there's a perception that one's better than the other, but you don't know the reality of how it's funneling to the end, to the end.
And back to your culture, the culture comment earlier, that this has been a real focus for us. If we're educating that each of the consumers at the food truck lots, now when they go home, they're going to have that additional piece of information. Maybe they received it in the mail, but they didn't read it. So it's a great reinforcement mechanism.
And it's visible and everyone's on the same page. So you don't feel left out if you aren't buying, one source or the other. It's been vetted for food truck owners have enough on their plate and being able to try to like showcase their best, to go container is another added level of pricing and stress that they don't have to deal with. That's an easy solution. I shouldn't say easy. It's a solution that helps educate and inform and create that culture shift in a lot of ways.
So just so I'm making sure I understand, Serena, the part that you kind of brought in. So we're talking about like this needing to do this direct outreach to businesses at the place of businesses. Sounds like food truck lots in particular is kind of low hanging fruit. Serena, did you say something about like having like almost like a purchasing collaborative? By Kelly, thank you. Almost like a purchasing collaborative, so that everyone is buying, so that more people are using the exact same takeout materials, so that it's easier for consumers to understand. Like they only have to learn like 4 things, not like 100 things.
Yeah, well, I think in some ways, it might be hard to set up at first because obviously each food truck owner has their own type of container that they might need based on the food that's being output. But in general, as in the simplest form, knowing like that they're purchasing responsibly for the county, for the city event, for the area that it's being disposed of. Yeah, most of us as residential, most of us that live here go to multiple food trucks on a regular basis. So it should become pretty straightforward to learn how and what needs to be where. And then it's kind of a stamp for them too, to say, hey, we're part of this collaborative. We care. Here's what we've learned. Here's what we know. And here's, and to be fully transparent, maybe it's QR code too. Here's limitations in our supply chain that we need to figure out, just kind of that kind of, if people want to know more. Yes, what you said is right.
Okay, well,
that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Thank you.
I'll let Kevin talk.
Can I chime in on this, or is this still related to the topic I've recused myself from? I'm not sure.
No, we're done with that. This was the question here. We've moved on to the second agenda item, and the question is like, what else does this group want to work on to achieve these CCAP strategies? That basically the things that are not being achieved by the Community Innovation Fund proposal. So that's where Kelly proposes kind of direct outreach to businesses, and then Serena added this layer of kind of facilitating this purchasing collaborative. So if you can weigh in on this, or also if you have other ideas of things that this working group and the ECC should be kind of working towards getting a proposal together for the city.
Yeah, no, I will lend my support to what both Kelly and Serena have said. I really agree that I think there's a large opportunity. I think a lot of I've talked to some food carts myself previously regarding this, and there is it was exactly the same answer that I think both Kelly and Serena mentioned, where they mentioned, oh yeah, we're using compostable foodware, not knowing that it's actually not compostable in the state of Oregon right now. So there is that lack of awareness with even business owners, where they're paying more without it actually having any like net positive environmental impact in that sense. I do want to add, and I really like Serena's idea of that collaborative. I don't know what that looks like, but if there's a way to incentivize businesses to like come together, and I think it like ends up being really beneficial for them, because there's like volume pricing discount too if they're all buying it together. So I think there could be like a super like win-win situation financially and environmentally that's possible there. I just want to mention, I don't know the impact this will have, but the Recycling Modernization Act does standardize what's recyclable across the state of Oregon. I don't know if compostable is foodware as part of that or not. I'm not as familiar with that. But I do know that that's something they're working on, which is still going through a rulemaking process. So that might make it easier to then choose the foodware that is actually either compostable or recyclable. One additional thought on that point that just came to me was that, and I think this was kind of brought up earlier, was, so we're focusing on, like, we have curbside composting now in the city of Bend, which I think is awesome, but there's still no, like, if you go to a food cart lot, there's no composting, available basically at any food cart lot that I've seen. So even if people have food, they want to like just compost just the food part of it, not even the foodware. I don't think that exists. So I don't know if I want to be careful of the scope of our actions as put in the CCAP, but I know, Cassie, we were also having this conversation about potentially some ideas for like adding to the CCAP as part of that kind of very limited set of ideas. And I just want to mention, if that's something that's not a large scale project where we could have composting available at most of the food cart lots in the city, I think that could go a big ways towards getting people used to how to do that outside when they're outside. And then they'd be like, oh, how do I do this at home as well? It's so easy.
Mhm.
So I just want to add that as a potential either part of this action, or see if the committee wants to add that as a potential action for the updated CCAP.
Cool.
I
That's
see it
great.
as separate, only because kind of what I said before, it's like more of a commercial channel versus a residential compost channel.
Yeah,
And
I think it's, oh, go ahead, Serena, sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I think we're on the same page. Just from my experience and working with some commercial businesses on the composting, it's super that you have to have very educated people disposing for it to not be contaminated. And while I want everybody to learn what that looks like, I don't see that. I mean, I'm not trying to discount what you're saying, Covey, at all. I know that there's a lot more hurdles in that. And that's one of the things we need to address. I'm going to just stop, but I do see it as a more complex issue.
It is. And I just want to share, because I had conversation about that about 2 years ago with Tess Freeman, who was working at the Rethink Waste project at that time in a similar role to the one I have now. And she had shared that I think at that time they had tried to do like pilot with the Deschutes Brewery, and they're running into okay, cool. They're running into issues with like, how do you have a bin for compost without it like starting to smell, and like just all these like logistical issues.
There's a lot, yeah.
So
and I'm not sure if we'd have to check, but I don't believe that the waste haulers will accept like commercial post-consumer waste. But I don't know, Serena, maybe from Deschutes, I know they do commercial compost, but I thought it was mainly like back of house. It's like stuff that the staff are in charge of, as opposed to just members of the public.
It was both, but the way that it worked at the time when I was there, and I can't speak to it now because I don't even know if that's a program that they're still utilizing. But at the time, because the way it worked is customers didn't throw their own, plates away. Like it was all cleaned off by staff.
Yeah.
And so it was educated and very well dialed, and the compost trucks, when they would come through, would power spray the bins, once a week when they did because that was part of the issue, the smell and the kind of that sort of thing. So I don't know, but I don't know if that still exists. And I don't know, again, partly because I think, our waste hauler have changed. So I don't know the dynamics of any of that. And I haven't had a relationship with the new haulers in a way to at least be able to give you more information at this point.
Okay, cool. So I have kind of two ideas. That is a separate idea that has been raised.
Yep.
Can I share an update on the code side of things, just since I know that's kind of been hanging out there? So we met with, I had a meeting with the county, our local DEQ liaison, and the new Republic Services municipal manager, which was great because I haven't had a contact there in a little while. And the DEQ liaison for Central Oregon, she does 18 counties, actually, like all of Eastern Oregon, basically, but she's also newish. I hadn't met her. And so she's closely tracking the Recycling Modernization Act, and she's kind of the point person for making sure, she's the one who's responsible for making sure like her territories are like coming into compliance with the Recycling Modernization Act correctly. So it was good. It was a more direct kind of like point of contact for us. She said during our meeting that they will in fact be creating, through rulemaking, they will be creating specific specifications and standards around the multifamily recycling spaces. So that was a question, Kavi, that you and I had kind of looked into, like, are you guys going to be coming up with these rules? Because if so, like, we don't want to make something now and then have to change it in 2 years. And formerly we had been told no, you'll be free to do whatever you want as long as you do something. That's not the message I got from this DEQ person. If it is true that in the rulemaking, they're going to be like, they are going to be writing those standards and specs and stuff, or I don't even know if that's the right verbiage, but coming up with parameters we have to meet. I would recommend that we wait for that because it's just going to come up a lot sooner than we think. And anyway, so what I was thinking, she shared that in a meeting where we were talking about a bunch of things. So I wasn't able to really dig into the details. So I was just going to get in touch with her and follow up on that and just like confirm once again that because she said like, oh yeah, for sure. So I'd like to confirm from her, like, are you positive about that? Has that decision been made recently? Or do you just think it will, like, just kind of dig into like the level of certainty we have on that. So that's kind of where I'm at with multifamily. The good thing is that I actually didn't realize from the Recycling Modernization Act that it will require statewide that all multifamily 5 units and above have to have recycling. So like there was the part that said the city code has to require the space for recycling collection, but I didn't think there was a component that said the multifamily developments must actually have the recycling collection, but that is part of it too. That was my understanding from the conversation I had. I don't know exactly how that works in every case, but so the city, in addition to an ordinance talking about the size of the size that you need for the dumpsters, there will also be a component of it, that an ordinance that we have to adopt that just says like, you must provide recycling at those. So that's kind of, cool news, I guess. So anyway, that's my update on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something with you or ask you a question on that, Cassie, make sure I understand it correctly. So you're saying the Recycling Modernization Act, the law itself has a requirement for all multifamily units or residences of more than 5 units, I think you said, to include space for recycling or to have like available recycling on premise.
Yes. Yeah, that's my understanding from this meeting, but the requirement will actually be on the cities because the cities are the ones that have to create the ordinance to make that go into effect.
Okay, so the state is going to require the cities to make sure there's code, and then they're going to create that code as part of the rulemaking, like a model code or required like minimums or whatever
required
it is.
Elements of that code. Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, that is definitely different than what we've heard before. I think throughout DEQ, and I don't know if this came up with one of our conversations with Odara at the Rethink Waste project, but I felt like there was no certainty because it's going to go through multiple rulemakings, and they're like through rulemaking process 1, and then 2, I guess, starts next year. But like I felt like, at least, I don't know where I remember hearing this from, but they were not even sure what's included in 1 right now. Like they're still going through like the 3rd meeting or whatever. So I'm just like wondering how certain that is, because I think if there's a high degree of certainty they're going to get to it next year, then it would make sense to wait. But if it's like, I don't know, if it's like less degree of certainty, I just don't want it to be something where we wait 2 years and then nothing happens, or it's not included, and then we still have to do the work just 2 years later, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I would like to follow up with the local DEQ woman who said that it would be required to just dig into that more, like how she knows that. And it would make sense. The DEQ would know more than a member of the rulemaking committee, just because Udar as a rulemaking committee member is just going through the process. But the DEQ is actually deciding what the process is. So they're the ones that are deciding. They're the ones that are deciding what will be in the rulemaking and what aren't. And when we talked to the DEQ, it was probably 4 or 5 months ago now. They might have just not scoped the rulemaking 2 yet, and maybe now they have scoped rulemaking 2. So I don't know if that's what's happened, or if this one DEQ staff was just different than another DEQ staff interpretation of what it would include. So that's the part I'll dig into a little bit more. And I'm happy. I was just going to reach out to her for like a Teams meeting. I'm happy to include, any of you if you'd like to be a part of that discussion. And we're having a lot more, we're trying to coordinate better on the RMA in general.
Yeah, I think I would be interested in that. I would like to know where that stands because I think it impacts this work and also a lot of the other waste and materials actions. If we're going to be doing any prioritization as a committee, I think it'd be helpful to know the impacts at RMA and like when they're expected. So if it's possible, if I can make it, I would like to join that.
Okay, cool.
And I felt like I had one more question related to that. Are there any other cities in Oregon, like Portland, that already have required codes like that? Because I'm guessing if they do come up with like a model code, it would follow the example of a city that already has it out there.
Yeah, that is research that I promised I would do and I have not done yet. So I can try to look into that. Or if any of you feel so inspired, you could Google it as well and see if anything comes up. I am not sure. I imagine at least some cities do already have a code in place.
Okay. But yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for the update, because I do agree if it's coming down the line, then it makes sense to wait so we don't have to do it again.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So where we're at, we have these two potential ideas to discuss further. In terms of this working group in general, it sounds like those two ideas are both kind of food waste focused. So in terms of this just general group, just working with those two ideas seem like the right next step. Are there other ideas you want to consider? Is there anything else just thinking about this group? I think when we're doing our work planning at the next meeting, we can see among the new members if anyone wants to join this group too. So that would be great. We can do that. We'll be able to do that at the meeting in just a couple of weeks. So yeah. Any other thoughts?
I had one quick thought, and I think this is more about like other ideas too. So let me make sure. Is it okay if I chime in with other ideas to for W3B for the food waste educational programs? So putting aside the CIF, I think this was something, I don't know if Kelly or Serena, either of you mentioned this directly in this way, but I feel like there is still like this, and I think Cassie, you alluded to this as well, but there's like still like, it just mentions like to residents kind of as a whole. And the CIF seems to encourage that, but it doesn't reach all the residents. So I don't know if it requires us, like you said, for the CCAP to fulfill that action to do additional work. Like, I don't know what that is, or if it's just educational programs either through the City of Bend or a partner that accomplish that on a more like citywide level.
Yeah, I mean, the CCAP is not like, there's nothing binding about any elements of it. So I think it's up to you guys to interpret how you want from it. I think that if you say the Community Innovation Fund is achieving this goal for us, I don't really think anyone's going to argue with you on that. But I think if you wanted to argue that, there's more we should do because it's not going to reach everybody, and you have some ideas for campaigns that could have a broader reach, I think that would be very valid. So it's kind of up to you guys.
Okay, I just wanted to share that at this stage, because I think I'm just thinking, at least when I read the action, it does seem a little bit more just, I guess intent seems to be like deliver programs that reach all residents. And I'm like trying to be careful because I'm accusing myself from part of this, but just, I feel like there's still other parts that are not as touched through the CIF. And so if there's a way to also pursue those programs, either from the City of Bend or with partners, again, in the kind of similar way or in addition, I think that would be something I would support.
And do you have ideas of what those other programs might be?
So I think it would almost, like, I guess the deliberative process would go in my head. If we're trying to reach all residents in the City of Bend with some kind of educational material about like, here's what you can compost, here's what you can recycle, here's what you can't recycle. And then seeing if that's something that the city of Bend already has materials or resources or, on, or if it doesn't, then is there another partner that has it? And I don't want it to be, because I work for the Environmental Center, I don't want it to be only focused on the Environmental Center, but I know they have the Rethink Waste program as a whole that has some materials and resources, and maybe like they do workshops. I don't know if they do, but if they do workshops, that could be a partner, or if 3 Feet of Shoots has something like that. So I don't know which partner I would almost think it would make sense for the working group or the committee to kind of see which programs are there other ways to get there in addition to the CIF, if that makes sense. Is at least what I'm thinking. So I know, I guess one example I'll just use is I got this little magnet poster from the magnet for the fridge from the Rethink Waste project a couple of years ago, and it's just has like, here's what you can recycle, here's what you can't, because a lot of people, there's still like the misperception of like the plastic number mattering versus like how the plastic is used. And so I think that's a pretty common misconception, and that leads to a lot of contamination in plastic. And this is all information that I attended a recent Rethink Waste project presentation, and it was shared in there. So I think they could potentially present this to the whole committee. But if there's a way to get that information out to more residents in the city of Bend, I think that would be helpful to achieving that goal.
Okay, and we did, when we first met with Udara, because we had 2 meetings with her, the first meeting was just broadly, what are your waste programs and who do they reach and who do they cover? I don't remember the details of that exactly, but my understanding is that the Rethink Waste program, that is, its scope is to reach all the residents in Bend, and they kind of have their ways of doing that. And, with all outreach and education programs, you have the problem of like, you have your intended audience. How do you make sure the whole audience actually hears it? So I do think that we could circle back to that, because so it kind of sounds to me like it would be helpful to know what is already out there as far as outreach and education that's going to all residents. That was kind of what those first 2 meetings were intended to help us get across. I don't know. So we could follow up on those. I think it might be circling back with the Environmental Center to just, and I could maybe even ask them to, maybe it'd be better to get some of this also like in writing, because it would be helpful for us to like refer to it. It would be like, what is going on? What is out there already? And then that would help us better identify the gaps and also identify like, okay, what's out there already and which of these things do we think we might want to amplify? So maybe it's also, so the waste haulers also do a lot of that. It's actually kind of good timing because the city is required every year to do something called an opportunity to recycle report, which is this old law. It's from decades ago that requires cities to be doing outreach and education. And we meet our requirements through the Environmental Center's work and through what the waste haulers distribute. So we don't do that in-house, but we have these partnerships that are doing them. That report is due in a month. And so we're actually going to be we're going to get a report in about a month detailing like, what is this that we do? And it's pretty similar to how it's been for the last many years. So I think by next month when we meet, I should be able to provide that and share that. And that would kind of that would include all the Environmental Center's programs as well. So that are kind of that broad community reach, because the requirements from the OTR for us are that it's like, you need to educate your community about what's recyclable, how to recycle, make sure that, anyway.
I think that's great. And I was going to mention too, the haulers also provide, to their paid groups or they should have access, whether it's online or sending it via mail, however you're subscribed to their services. They should have that kind of information. And I think between knowing what the Rethink Waste is doing, getting this report, which I think will be super helpful for us to better understand the limitations and how people are assuming they recycle and what that looks like, can help us better understand what kind of materials and additional support we need from the already identified groups and potential, other groups that we haven't talked to, maybe that are out there. I don't know.
Yeah. So I think, does that seem, Cubby, like an appropriate kind of next step for that is like just getting this kind of inventory of what's already done and then using that to identify like the gaps and opportunities.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I think I'm glad to hear there's already that partnership to like reduce the waste, or it's like required from the state level. And I think the only thing I'll add, I would love to see the reporting and kind of it would be helpful to kind of see where the opportunity areas. I just remember one of the things that had been shared when the Rethink Waste project did their kind of multifamily recycling pilot project, and the report that was shared from there was which I thought was really cool, was they had a contamination percentage or something decrease in contamination percentage from their education piece that was done. So I would love to see like, oh, what is the impact of some of these education programs if you're able to measure that? Like if we did an audit right now and we saw contamination was at this percent, and we did, some of these education programs in the city is funding or supporting some of these programs, I would love to see what the impact of that is. And I think that would really help us with tracking the impact of CCAP.
And to your point,
sorry. I just don't know how possible it is to measure the impacts on contamination from outreach and education, because so with the multifamily, you can in controlled experiments. So with the multifamily one, they had like, we're doing this bin, we've given out this thing, and they had people measuring before and after. Doing that at a community scale is much harder because one, you could do a bunch of outreach and education, and if the contamination changes in the compost or recycling, we wouldn't know like it was because of this education or that education. And two, I don't believe we don't currently even have a local waste characterization study. So we don't have like actual numbers on our contamination rates. And to do that is a very expensive study that will get done infrequently. So anyway, that's just, I guess, to set expectations about how to measure that. But that's not to say there's not other ways we might want to identify, like how do you measure, success of outreach and education?
Yeah. But I think in simplest form, what Cubby was saying about just, can we take what is good and not good for recycling and put it in a magnet or a laminated sheet or something that you can literally tape to your garbage can or your recycling bin, or there's just a lot more visual cues that I think, for some of us, we do it because that's part of our mission in our daily lives. But for a lot of people, too busy, don't know that they should, don't know that they want to, just make it as simple and as easy as possible, give them some of those tools. So that could be, more discussion as we see some of that reporting.
Yeah. Okay. We're almost at time. So I think as far as next steps, in the next meeting, we'll have, again, probably roughly half of it or as much time as we need to dedicated to reviewing the Community Innovation Fund proposal. And then I think we've got these three, hopefully I have the opportunity, we have these, so that'll be the first part of the meeting. Second part of the meeting is we have these three ideas. And I think we should kind of circle back on these three ideas and decide, and we'll have input from other people too, and kind of decide like which one we want to focus in on, or if you guys want to do some individual research and come back. One thing I encourage us to think about in the time between then and now is, especially that first idea. I think it's a really good idea about that direct outreach to businesses and especially in the collaborative purchasing, but thinking about like, okay, good idea. Like what are the steps that would need to happen to make that become a reality? Because for me, of course, the immediate questions are like, who's going out and doing that outreach? Like, is that city staff? Is that the committee members? Is that us hiring somebody to go do that? Like who is at the food truck lots doing that? Same thing with the collaborative purchasing. It's like, is that the request that there is a city staff person who facilitates that collaborative purchasing? And all those things are totally fair game, but that's what it will come down to, is like that the recommendation will need to be like, say you really wanted to double down on this collaborative purchasing idea, the recommendation would be like, hire somebody, or make this, it doesn't have to be hire a new person, but make this part of somebody's job to like run this collaborative purchasing program. I think there's some clever ideas. It could be like, and then that person can maybe be charged with partnering with green teams in the school district to do that outreach to the food trucks. Like there's definitely cool programs in there, but that's kind of what we need to think about, is like, what is it that we're recommending that the city do to get there? All
very fair questions and totally understandable. We need somebody that's accountable to do it, which is, fair. I know we're out of time. Just a quick thought that we don't necessarily need to answer today, but has the city utilized college interns as part of a potential project or research in this type of way that we could, as a group or a subgroup, help support and advise and manage? Or is that totally out of the realms of just?
No, I've had several interns. We have such a good partnership with OSU Cascades right here.
Yeah.
So we could definitely look into interns. It's definitely been a good learning lesson at figuring out what are appropriate projects for interns, given their, it's a little bit,
yep.
You just have to think about that.
Oh no, I do. Yeah. I've worked with a lot of them too. And it's like bandwidth on being able to support and advise them, but also giving them what the tools and the resources they need and can access to do their job. But yeah, I just a thought from that community outreach, talking to food trucks, that sort of thing. Those are things that anyone that has time and comfortable, a comfortable space to do so with like a talking tool could potentially do. Just a thought. I was just throwing out one idea.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's good. It's good to be thinking about these things because we are in budgeting right now, and the budgets, will be finalized in the spring. And so it will be easier, especially something like interns, it's best to pay interns. And, we have opportunity to flex the budget a little bit.
Yeah.
We're not really, anyway, we have about a month or two to do that. So
just creative resources, maximizing dollar sort of thing. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Well, this was a great meeting. Thank you for your time. And I'll send out a doodle to get one in another month or so.
Awesome. Thank you for all your work.
Thanks, Cassie. And is there any way you can just, I know you mentioned those 3 ideas. Is there any way you can just include that in the doodle email too, just so I can do some research?
Yeah, definitely. I'll do that.
Thank you.
If I forget, then just email me back and ask for it again.
I will. All right.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.